G'day and welcome to ReDriven, and welcome to a top 5 list that is sure to get those keyboards firing up with hatred and abuse, because if ever there was a subject that gets grown adults having tantrums, it's when someone criticises the cars that they've spent a fortune on modifying. But let's get something straight here. Most of the cars that we're mentioning on this list in standard form are pretty good cars. In fact, one in particular is very, very special. However, they're either instantly ruined once some muppet with too much money gets their hands on them, or modifying them is like an exercise in futility because even after being modified, they're average at best. Also, before you go screaming at me in the comments, I didn't personally come up with this list. This is a culmination of a whole bunch of different industry experts' opinions. We spoke to mechanics, tuning specialists, motoring journalists, even a couple of advanced professional driver trainers. So yeah, look, don't scream at me in the comments. Blame us all. Anyway, look, let's get into this and bring on the hatred. And look, we're actually going to break one of our own rules to start with, because we generally try to feature cars that are internationally available, but this thing is so infuriating when modified, it had to be mentioned. I'm sorry, Australia, it's the Holden Commodore. Okay, look, before any of you go having a meltdown, we're excluding any Commodores with a V8 engine and obviously models wearing a HSV badge, as long as that HSV badge was attached to the car by HSV. Even in terms of the specific generations, look, anything prior to the VL will escape criticism for now, as will anything after the VT. We'll even leave the VR and VS alone, leaving us with the underwhelming VN and, to a slightly lesser extent, the VP. Before we get into why these are such overrated tuner cars, let's focus on some positives. They have a spacious interior, they were relatively refined at the time, they're robust and they're pretty much indestructible, and they make for decent tow cars and great highway cruisers when in standard form. They were even one of the key factors that put Holden back in the game. But thanks to the line's financial dramas, Holden had to resort to fitting the wider VN body to narrower carryover VL chassis components in a bid to save development costs. This resulted in the heavily compromised and flawed VN feeling sloppy and wallowy the moment driving even hinted at becoming enthusiastic. And yes, while the VP's handling was dramatically improved and many regard it to be a much better car than its predecessor, these days on the used market, it still cannot match a plethora of other cars when it comes to tunability at the current asking prices. Basically, no matter what you do to these 6-cylinder Commodores, especially the autos, short of completely re-engineering them, they just make no sense to modify. What's the old saying? You can't polish a turd? That seems pretty appropriate. Yet, plenty of Aussies, especially blokes on their P-plates, still persist with lowering these soggy handling tired old barges and fit cheap dodgy exhaust systems in the hope of extracting a few precious extra horsepower, when in reality they're just making an already slow car slower while gifting all of those within earshot with what must be one of the worst engine notes in all of automotive. What makes even less sense is that for the same asking price as these Commodores, you can buy a second generation Lexus IS250. You'll still get a front-engined rear-wheel drive 4-door sedan with a decent-sized boot, but the Lexus has a superior power-to-weight ratio, it will be a decade newer, it's ultra-reliable, plus it will handle in ways that the Commodore could only dream of, and possess a build quality that will make the Holden feel like your 6-year-old cousin made the Commodore from paper mache and their own saliva. Why anyone modifies these VNs or VPs, or to a lesser extent any 6-cylinder automatic Commodore, is just beyond us, but guys, just please stop it. And next up at the complete opposite end of the financial spectrum when it comes to overrated tuner cars, it's turbocharged Lamborghinis, especially Huracans and Gallardos. Obviously, there's no denying that these things can possess levels of power and acceleration that may quite possibly tear the asphalt they're driving on from the earth it was once adhered to, but the long list of negatives have us questioning, what's the point? Firstly, the sheer cost. Here in Australia, currently the very cheapest Gallardo on sale is asking over $200,000, while the cheapest Huracan is listed for $375,000. Then add anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for the twin turbo kit with installation, calibration and tuning, and sure, the end result will see you sending your Italian exotic to 100 kilometers an hour in under 3 seconds, and the quarter mile will come up in the 9s, but these days, you could save yourself $100,000 or more and achieve the same performance results, yet in a car that has 5 seats, a huge boot, loads of practicality, and when it's not rearranging your internal organs, makes for a bloody lovely daily driver. You know what car we're talking about? Yes, it is the Tesla Model S Plaid, and yes, it does make these Lamborghinis look a bit silly these days. But the thing is, we're about to receive a whole new bunch of insanely fast EVs that will give these loud, obnoxious Lambos a serious run for their money. Plus, unlike the tuned to the limit Italians that require continual and expensive maintenance and tuning, as Porsche have proven with their Taycan, EVs, generally speaking, can perform at their best over and over again. The Tesla can struggle with that just a little bit. Secondly, the Giotto, Huracan, and even sibling Audi R8 are machines of utter precision that some of the world's most talented engineers and drivers have spent countless hours honing and developing to be the very best that they can be, working with budgets that delve into the billions of dollars. To think that slapping on a couple of turbos and turning up the volume to 11 will somehow improve the overall dynamics of these exotics is to many just downright arrogant. We're obviously not saying that modifying a car to your needs is wrong. Adjusting the suspension and fitting some semi-slicks for a serious track day session is highly recommended. But spending such huge amounts of money to basically re-engineer cars like this is just simply overrated. Thirdly, driving these turbocharged supercars to the speeds that they're capable of on public roads is just downright stupid. If you want to drive this fast, take it to the track. And if you're going to the track, for what it costs to buy a Lamborghini and then turbo it, look, just go and buy an outright race or drag car. It's that simple. Okay, next up, here we go. It's the BMW 3 Series, but calm down BMW fans, it's a couple of specific models. We're talking about the E90, E91, E92 and E93 in 316, 318 and 320i variants. But what makes these so overrated? Well, firstly, and this is going to be heartbreaking to many BMW fans, but a 2012 to 2014 1.6 litre Kia Rio has a superior power to weight ratio over even the most powerful E90 320i. Sure, look, it's not rear-wheel drive and it lacks all of the luxury brand bullshit and marketing hype that comes with simply being a European car, but the Rio has locally developed and tuned suspension and steering, so it's genuinely fun to drive. And if something were to break, which it probably won't because it's a modern Kia, it'll be incredibly affordable to fix, which is maybe something we can't say about the BMW. Which brings us to the next negative about this particular 3 Series, its engine. Many BMW fans, they think about the problem-riddled N43 and N46 engines in the same way that I think about much of my extended family. We just wish they never existed in the first place. The N43 and N46 suffer from stretched timing chains, fuel injector problems, Vanos gremlins, coil pack failures, and a host of various electronic issues, resulting in, best case scenario, the engine running like utter crap, or the worst case scenario, catastrophic engine failures. So why the hell does anyone modify and tune these things? They're pretty bloody slow. Dynamically, there are a load of other cars at the same price that are easily as enjoyable and most likely more capable. And rather than spending even more money to modify a 316, 318 or 320i, just spend that extra cash to buy one of the slightly more expensive and far more impressive 6-cylinder variants and just leave it standard. Yes, we'll admit they can look very cool with some stance and on the right set of wheels, but don't be fooled by the BMW badge and the fact that it's a rear-wheel drive car. These things are just simply overrated. Okay, next up and opening ourselves up to even more hate, it's the Toyota Supra. Right, we're specifically talking about the 4th generation A80 and even more specifically the naturally aspirated models with an automatic transmission. If ever there was the automotive equivalent of owning a fake Rolex, it's this thing. Just to reiterate, turbocharged Supras are obviously one hell of a tuner car, capable of pumping out many hundreds of horsepower with relative ease. And even the naturally aspirated manual transmissioned A80s are okay in their own way. However, they do scream that this is the Supra you buy when you really wanted a turbocharged one but couldn't afford it. Also, the automatic transmission itself, it can handle some huge power, but then we're talking beyond the realms of just tuned and more into, completely re-engineered levels of modification. But modified, naturally aspirated Supras with an automatic gearbox, and excluding those that must drive an auto due to some medical issues, are just simply overrated. Amazingly, even these are currently asking over $45,000, which for that asking price opens up a world of other performance cars that will dominate the Supra in terms of power to weight ratio, handling, dynamics, tunability, and just performance in general. Honestly, if you just must have some retro JDM in your life, for north of $45,000, there are plenty of other cars that offer a far superior driving experience to an automatic naturally aspirated Supra. In terms of the positives, look, yes, they can be tuned to handle superbly well with some quality suspension, brakes and performance tyres. The chassis was engineered from the start to be an outright sports car, and that engine is near indestructible. But the auto box, as strong as it is, it's a slow old slush box of a thing, and it instantly detracts from the Supra's otherwise shining characteristics. Many of those that we spoke to when formulating this list commented that a modified turbocharged manual Supra is for those that take their driving in their car seriously, whereas an automatic naturally aspirated Supra is for those pretending. Again, obviously this excludes anyone that has to drive an automatic for medical reasons. You guys can drive whatever you want. Now guys, before we get to the top spot, look, the only way that we can keep making these videos is with your support, and the easiest way to support us is simply by hitting the like, subscribe, and bell button down there and sharing our content. The more you do of all that sort of stuff, the more of these videos we can make for you. Okay, again, a bit of a disclaimer here. Look, we do know of people that have modified this next car. They take them to the track all the time and they've never had a problem and they absolutely adore the car. The problem is those people are in the minority because so many of these are just turning to shit. It's the Mazda RX8. Okay, let's do the positives first. As we found in our full RX8 review video, which you can watch just up here, the RX8 exhibits plenty of fabulous characteristics. You get all of the benefits of a sports car with almost none of the drawbacks. With its excellent weight balance, the handling is superb. It sounds amazing when revving out to its 9,000 RPM redline, and it's just such a unique vehicle in general. However, and excluding those that have had a complete engine transplant, thanks to many previous owners not providing the RX8 with the fastidious levels of care and maintenance they require, so many examples out there are quite literally ticking time bombs. As we cover in our full review video, the list of common failures and problems with these things is immense. Not to mention their huge appetite for oil and fuel and the lack of torque the engine produces when compared to the RX8's curb weight. Yes, look, you can modify these to become a great car, and with an engine swap, they can become genuine giant killers, but with so many potential and most likely expensive repair bills hiding around the corner that will eat into your modification budget, and the fact that for what these are asking for, there are just other arguably better alternatives out there, they simply don't make sense for all but the most hardcore RX8 fans. Basically, the RX8 may very well be one of the least reliable modern cars, and short of spending huge money on the engine, it's also simply not powerful enough to truly impress as a sports car these days, hence why it's just overrated when it comes to being a tuner car. Unless, again, you want to do a full engine swap or you're just happy to throw a fortune at it. It had to be mentioned, and I'm sure... Oh, you EVs, generally speaking, can perform at their here we go. Has a superior power to weight ratio over... The best case scenario, an engine running like so many examples out there. Oh, jolly good show, right? That bums away. Most likely expensive repair bills hiding around the next corner that will in the next corner. Yeah, money's good. Okay, so what did you think of the list? And guys, can we please keep the abuse to a minimum? I know I've probably upset many of you, but we are doing our best here. So yeah, keep it polite. See you next week.